just like that, we are back for another episode of If I Knew Then What I Know Now. Dad, it's good
Yes,
to see you again. You're looking good. I like this all black outfit you got going today. How's everything
thank you,
going?
man. I thought it'd be a little bit swaggy. I know you're gonna come into the show on the show swaggy, so I had to try to match him.
Hey, I appreciate
Chica.
that.
You know how he is.
This is I mean every episode is special, but this one is really special because this time we have our very first guest. We've been saying we wanted to have a guest on for a while because you know people might get tired of us every
Yeah,
episode. So we're really excited. This time we have Dr. Shica on with us. Dr. Shica, how you doing? Thanks for
I'm
joining.
doing great. Thanks for having me. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me as the first guest, actually.
First
yeah.
guest, first guest. Yeah, it's a privilege to have you. I mean, just as a little bit of an intro, so we call this video series "If I Knew Then What I Know Now," and basically it just kind of came up because my dad and I we've had a lot of conversations recently just between our generations of him sharing some experiences about when he was younger, me sharing some experiences about, this phase of life I'm in. And I think I've realized how important it is for me to get a lot of wisdom from people that, have seen it before, have done things and gone through some of the things that I may be going through now. So this is kind of what this show is all about wisdom share, about people reflecting, giving younger generations wisdom, and also about us maybe giving some perspective to other generations as well. So it's a pleasure to have you on here because we know you have a lot of wisdom about life, but also especially about entrepreneurship, which is going to be the special topic for today. So how's that sound?
Oh, that sounds great. I have a lot to share. So,
So I guess to start it off, Dr. Shika, we'll pass it to you. If you could just give anybody that's listening a little bit of your bio, tell us about yourself, and tell us about the company that you run as well.
okay, great. Well, the reason why I wanted to find out how long the segment is because I wanted to know, do you want the short story or do you want the long story?
We want the long story. We want the
it's
whole
a
story.
it's
We
a
want the
short
truth and
and
nothing
long
but the
story,
truth.
short and long story of everything. So I'm Dr. Chico at Dr. Chico's Bakery. The way it started was really just haphazard. It was like one of those things that God orders your steps, and one thing leads to the next. That's exactly how I got here to where I am right now. So all of us, Lloyd and your son, I remember you, Jordan, when you were like this high. We all went to
Yeah.
church together in Atlanta, and that was kind of like the start of my journey, like a part of it anyway. I had always liked baking. I was from South Carolina. We're from South Carolina, and so we lived there, grew up there. I loved to bake with my grandmother, making cookies and things like that over the summertime. And I would think I was about 10 years old when I really found out a passion about me loving to bake. And so one of the stories that I wanted to share is like being at grandma's house over the summertime. I actually convinced my grandma to use a can of her biscuits to let me make my first dessert. And if you have a southern grandmother, they don't play about the can of biscuits. That can of biscuits is for dinner, it's not for you to play over. So I convinced my grandma to let me use those, and she was like, "What are you gonna do with these or whatever?" And I was like, "Just let me do my thing in the kitchen." So what I did is I took a biscuit and poked a hole in the middle of it with my finger, and actually made donuts and fried them on both sides. And then I made the cinnamon and sugar mixture and kind of dipped it on both sides or whatever. So that was my first dessert, was making like a cinnamon and sugar donut. And then the next hardest thing I had to do was to ask my aunties to try it. And they were thinking like, okay, she's 10 years old. I don't know if I want to try anything that a 10-year-old has made. But they tried it and they loved it. And so that was like my first experience with learning how to bake and just getting a feel and a joy for it. And so, after living in South Carolina, growing up there, I never thought that I would be in baking. Never thought. I didn't even plan on going down that career path actually, because when I moved to Atlanta, well, just back up a little. I was in South Carolina. I taught school. I taught middle school. I taught elementary school. So that's kind of how it started as a teacher. Started teaching, went back to school, moved to Atlanta, went back to school, got my master's in education, continued to work on my doctorate. And at the time when I was in Atlanta working on my doctorate, Michael was the breadwinner of the family. Everything going great, and he was feeling great, feeling well. I was actually a full-time, pretty much stay-at-home mom working on my doctorate. One day, Michael came home from Bible study, because we went to Bible study that Wednesday night. He got back home and literally just did not feel well. He started feeling dizzy, had migraines really bad, and at that time, he was sick for months. And he's still been battling migraines ever since. That's been like 15 years ago. So at that point, life does throw you curveballs. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I was a stay-at-home mom working on my doctorate. I got to change this up because he has to have time to heal. And at that time, I was already teaching college online. I was working on my doctorate online. And I didn't know what we were going to do because that was a big curveball. So at that point, I accepted a teaching position to teach college in Phoenix. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, this is great. This will give us time to reset, give Michael time to, get his health back in order. So we moved to Phoenix. We moved to Phoenix and lived there for about 2 years. And during that time, I was working on my doctorate. I was also teaching college. And I would say that was one of the hardest times in my life. Because not only doing that, but, Michael was sick, having to help him, and teaching college, and working on a dissertation. So imagine that, you're reading and grading papers all day, but then you have to logically create your own dissertation, which is, wow, about 300 pages. And the hardest thing I've ever done was to do that. But I was super motivated. I stuck to it. I didn't have any free time at all. I would literally go to work, teach from like 11 to 8. I would come home. I would work on my dissertation, get up the next morning at 6, work on my dissertation from 6 to 10, go back to work and do it all over again. But I was very determined because Phoenix was great, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. I always wanted to live in California, actually. And that was a dream of mine in high school. I was like, I always wanted to live in Hollywood. That was my thing. So finished my dissertation. And there was a position that actually opened up with my university in California. So they wanted someone to move there. So that's how we moved to California. So here I am. I'm like, okay, well, I made it to my dream city of living here in California. So I made it. But at the same time, I had already still been working on my craft. I was still making desserts and things on the side because I had a side hustle. So I was doing my side hustle of making desserts. I was working during the day. And I would do pop-ups around LA, and I would do bakery items, and I took my mother's recipes again. Like, to me, baking is almost like a science. I can go in there and try it and taste it, and all these recipes people kept asking me to do, I would literally perfect it. I would go in there and I'm like, okay, I never made brownies before, but you know what? I want these brownies to be the best tasting brownies you've ever had. So everything I created, I made it based on, I want someone to say this is the best thing that they've ever had. And I kept that and actually made that into a business. And so the way I got to the business part of it is that, doing the side hustle, doing pop-ups around LA, it got me into a circle of celebrity clients. And so I would do pop-ups off of Melrose area. And there were a lot of celebrities and people there that would come by. And so the word started getting around to different people about my desserts. And so I was still working. Keep this in mind, I was still working and doing my job, but this was my side hustle. So here comes the thing. Life throws you curveballs. Again, here was a curveball. COVID happened. And so when COVID happened, my job closed their doors. And they were like, well, we're not going to keep going. We're going to close this business. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so at that point, I was like, okay, well, the marketing director for my company, she was saying that, well, you've been doing pop-ups and you've been doing your desserts. Why don't you go full steam into your bakery now? And I was like, okay, well, I have nothing to lose. I don't have anything else to do right now. I should just go ahead and do that. And so with that in mind, there was an opportunity to open at one of the malls. Somebody told me about it, and they said, oh, they're trying to get a bakery to go into the mall in a kiosk, and they said that, oh, they'll give you the space as long as you go in there. They'll just maybe take a couple little bit of your profit, but it will get you started. So here we are with the store in the mall in California doing a bakery. And so at that time, while I was working in the mall, and I really found out at that point you need to have a product that you can sell anywhere, not just limit yourself to one mall location. Because one mall location, one day you may have 200 people come by. The next day you may have 100 people come by or 50 people come by. You never know because you're dependent on the mall traffic. But what I did know is I started to pick up and listen to what people would say, and they would say, "Oh, I wish my sister could have these vegan cookies in Brooklyn because she's been looking for something like this." And then I started thinking about, well, you know what? Well, I'm already here at the mall. And what I would do is I would mix the mix every day for people who would bake for me. Because in order to have consistency in a product, they may not mix it like I do. And so what I did is this was the first product that we came up with, which was the cookie mix. And the
Mm-hmm.
cookie mix I was already making for the store. So I would actually make the cookie mix and just have the baker to add the water and the butter to it. And so it would taste like mine every single time. So since I was
Mm.
doing that already, that was the birth of the first product because I was like, hey, we can put it in a bag. Now we can ship it to your sister in New York and she can make it and make it taste just like the store. So that's how the first
Yeah.
product came out. Second product came out because sometimes you have people who just don't want to bake. They don't want to bake at all. They don't care if it's super easy. They don't care if it tastes just like yours. They just want to eat. And so that's how we came up with, okay, well, we're going to make them for you and we're going to put them in a bag and we're going to sell them to you so you can just open them up and eat them. And so that's
That's
how,
the
you know, you,
category I fall in right there. That's
yeah,
my
that's
category.
that's how you come up with the product line because you're constantly listening to your customer and you're like you got to pick up on it. You know, they say that they want something that you can ship anywhere. Okay, well, that's opportunity. It's an opportunity because I was already making a cookie mix. Same thing, listen to the customer. I don't want to bake it. It's set up in my cabinet for a whole 2 months before I even start baking the cookies. Then that's too
Mhm.
long because, you know, if we have something that you can eat right away, then that person would have bought 3 or 4 or 5 bags of this before they actually had a chance to make it one time. So
Right.
those are things that you have to just pick up on. I
Yeah.
know it was a long story, but I
Oh,
know you have a lot of questions that we can actually,
no.
you know, deep
I
dive
mean,
into even more.
wow. I
Uh,
mean, at that point, I'm like, where do you start? I think that brings up so many questions, but I appreciate you giving us the sort of backdrop, and I'm sure that's even just a brief glimpse into
Oh
the
yeah,
whole story.
yeah.
But you brought up something that's interesting, or I guess as you were talking about this, the thing that was interesting to me was how many transitions have occurred throughout
Yeah.
this journey, really, and because of that, I'm interested in hearing your perspective on this. But Dad, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
have a perspective on this as well. Is what were some of the emotions for both of you guys as you go through these big transition phases, whether it's a big move or, whether it's your partner getting sick and you have to
Yeah.
adjust a little bit? What were some of those emotions that you felt in the process, and how did you sort of manage those emotions to keep going? What were some
so,
of the
Yeah.
tools you used?
so what I would
I
say is
before
that
you
you,
before you even answer that question though, I want to rewind. Go. Let's go. You've shared so much valuable content, but let's rewind before you answer the question that Jordan talked about because I I wanted you to go all the way back to our hometown because we grew up in the same hometown. We didn't know each other, but
oh, that's
we're talking
right.
about
That
small.
is right.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
exactly right. I
we're,
forgot all about that.
yeah, right. So we grew
We
up in a
did.
small town, out, in the Greenville area, Greenville, South Carolina area. We'll call that, but we're in the outskirts suburbs of that town. Before you answer Jordan's question, let's start from there. So
Yeah.
how do you get his questions is really apropos because how do you get from this small town in South Carolina and make your way through all these transitions? And I love that the conversation about transitions because I know I have my story, but we want to hear your story. how do you make these transitions in a way that you end up from the small little town in Greenville, South Carolina, up suburbs, let's put it that way, to Atlanta, to California. These are major transitions that you made, and you probably had.
Right.
I want to know. I'm like Jordan. I want to know what obstacles came in your way to get to these different milestones.
Well, I think that it really, I think it's intrinsic
Yeah.
motivation, I would say,
Mm.
because the harder things are for you, you tend to know that you got to lean on God more for that. And every time something happens like a challenge, you look at it from an outside perspective of what am I supposed to learn out of this? How do I get to the next step? And really, it starts like that because you're right. We're both from the same small town, very small town. My goal in high school was to go to UCLA. I always wanted to move to California, go to UCLA. I had big dreams from the beginning. But Michael and I ended up having Ashley, our oldest daughter. I was a senior in high school when I had Ashley. So at that point, that was not planned. And I did not, I remember promising myself that I would not be a statistic, that I'm not going to have a daughter at a teenage and not make it. That was my whole thing. And it really set the stage up because I didn't want to be that person that had a daughter and, oh, she can't go to college, she can't do anything. So I made it from that point. I said, I'm going to get every degree that I can possibly get. And I got 3 degrees.
Wow.
I have a bachelor's, a
Wow.
master's, and a doctorate. And at that point, I
Wow.
didn't know how I was going to move to California. But if you have a supportive husband, like Michael, being that we both met, I was 15 when we met,
Mm.
and we've been together that long. And he's always supported my goals. He's never been that person to say, "Oh, I don't think you can do that," or "I don't think you can move to California." But at the time, having a baby and being a senior and graduating, Ashley attended my high school graduation. We laugh at that a lot, but at that point, Michael and I were like, "Well, we can't take a baby all the way to California and go to UCLA and have zero help." We knew we couldn't do that. But what we did do is stay along the path of what we were wanting to do and just gradually getting from there. Going from Greenville to Atlanta was a big step. It did prepare
Mm.
us in living in a big city, and it actually kind of got us ready for the next step, which was moving to Phoenix and then ultimately moving to LA, being the second largest city in the country. It probably would not have worked any other way. Going straight from Greenville to LA really would have been
Huh.
a culture shock. So just having
Mhm.
those little bitty chunks and little moves and experiences helped us to get to where we wanted to be.
Mhm.
I think there's so much power in that. And that I feel like you probably have a perspective on this too. But what advice would you give to people as they're going through different emotions and as a part of these life transitions as well? What would be your guidance
Yeah.
for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Sure.
Oh, no, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Yeah. As a executive coach and business coach, I took a course that's called transition transitional coaching. It was about this whole concept about in our lives there'll probably be five transitions that will shape our future. Transitional coaching, probably five experiences or five situations that will shape our future. And I as you talked about this, Dr. Shika, I've thought about my transitions, and some of those transitions are transitions that are good. Some of them are
Mhm.
traumatic, and so, and it's about how we transition in a way that we might have to pivot, or we have to be resilient. We have to be resourceful. All those things, and that's what the coaching process of transitioning, helping people transition is about. Is helping you to navigate all these transitions that can be life changing. You talked
Right.
about having a child in your younger age, in your years, which is a transition. It's a
Yeah.
transition. Now you go from, you know being on your, being responsible for you to being responsible for some another human being. That's a
Right.
transition that really, sometimes those transitions are the things that derail people, right? And you
Right.
said something that was powerful. You said, I didn't want to be a statistic. Well, think about the thousands and maybe millions of teenage young women who didn't transition as well as you did, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
were a statistic. So that's what think about, Jordan, when I think about these traumatic, these changes, these shifts in our lives, which are transitional moments, and think about how we navigate them. And it goes back to, if I knew then what I know now,
Right.
would I do it better, right? Would I make better
Yeah.
decisions in these transitional moments? Really deep conversation. So yeah, I've had, I could think about 4 or 5 transitional moments. Jordan, you probably can think about some even in your life where you had these transitional moments where you had to pivot, you had to be resilient, you lost something, but then you gained something, right? At the
Right.
same time. And how we process all that. What's your thinking about that, Jordan?
Yeah, I think what you said definitely helps in terms of. I think this whole "if I knew then what I know now" concept helps a little bit if you have some guidance, and I think
Yeah.
that's why a lot of times a
Hmm.
good coach, like you mentioned, or having a mentor is really helpful in these situations where you're just like, I have no idea where to go. I've never been in this
Right.
situation before. I've never, lived in a city like this. I've never worked a job like this.
Yes.
And I'm sure you guys had that emotion. And I think it can be a little bit scary. I think
Yeah.
pretty much everybody can relate to that situation where you just feel like you're in over your head. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's why I really value conversations like this, because I think sometimes a situation that's completely new and crazy and unbelievable to you, to someone
Yeah.
else is, a battle they've already
Yeah.
overcome, and it's a little bit more normal. So I think it calms me down a little bit, you know, if I'm in that transition phase and I go talk to someone else who maybe didn't do it perfectly, but they went through it and they have a lot of wisdom and value to share. And that kind of helps me calm down and be like, okay, this isn't new. I'm going to get through this. And
Yeah.
there's someone else out there that understands the emotions I'm going through as a part of it too.
And I like
Yeah.
what
And
you
I
said
think,
about
yeah,
Oh, I like what you
sure.
said about that because, like, I feel like all of us are lifelong learners and we can stand to
Mm,
Yeah.
learn from everybody. And because you're constantly learning about situations, and so, everyone needs a mentor. I mean, I might have needed a
Mm,
mentor at your age or at my age or at
yeah.
Floyd's age. Like, all of us can stand to learn from each other. But what I also think is that the different generations, like millennials, can learn from the baby boomers, and the baby boomers can learn
Yeah.
from the Gen Zers, and all of us
Right.
can learn from one another because I was telling Michael the other day, and this is funny, when we were both at Clemson, both of us went to Clemson together as well. So we went to college together too. Had a baby, but we still were going to college and everything together. But I just remember in one of my classes, the internet had just come out,
mm,
and it was like I was like, wow, this is new. And at the time, I was like, I'm not embracing this. Like, send an email. That was like a part of my project in class, and I was like, what is an email? Like, I don't need to know what an email is. I'm writing somebody in China as a project, and I don't want to write them. Like, but I had no idea that everything now is revolving around technology, revolving around internet, revolving around email. Apps are different. You don't even have to go to the bank anymore. So, to make a long story short, I feel like your generation, Jordan, can help us a lot, with social media marketing. Like, that's a degree
Mhm.
now. That was not a degree a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. I mean, when my time, it was just a marketing degree. But then those people who got marketing degrees have no clue on how to do social media marketing. So that degree is almost
Right.
obsolete. So we have to lean on, your generation to help us with things like that. And you can lean on us too for things that were a little bit more premature dinosaurs like.
Yeah. 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 That's good stuff. Yeah. When as you guys were thinking, we're thinking about these transitional moments we've been discussing. I can give you an example. I like, I share one with you. Dr. Shica, you shared some transitional moments with us. And as you talked about that, I thought about my first years in college. I went to one of the colleges I went to. I'm like you, I went to several colleges, but the first college I went to was South Carolina State University, South Carolina State in Orangeburg, and that was at a great time there, and it was good. And then there was a transition my sophomore year that really shifted my whole direction. That's what we're talking about. These transitions can shift your whole directions and your plans, right? And that was the year that my mother and father separated. They got
Mhm.
divorced in my sophomore year, and you can say that, well, you're almost an adult there, but you still those type of things impact you majorly,
Right.
just like it would if you were 5 years old or 10 year old. It's traumatic
Yeah.
because you're used to a certain lifestyle, certain way of living with two loving parents, and now that's been disrupted, and you don't really know who you are, right?
Right.
That whole moment of really trying to figure out what is going on, what is life, where is life going to take me now? This whole sense of security that I thought I had is now has been just been disrupted, but that got me to start thinking about, hey, you need to grow up faster than you thought you did, right?
Right.
Because now you're going to have to make more decisions about what your life is going to look like than you thought you had. You don't have mom and dad in the household to do that, and they're distracted. And so now I've
Right.
got to take my responsibility for me into my own hands. And
Hmm.
that transition period and event led me to leave University of South Carolina, of South Carolina State, that is, and go to Atlanta. That's how I
Oh,
ended up to Atlanta to go
yeah.
to art school. I always wanted, like you talked about this whole thing that we have, this thing that we want to do in the back of our minds. We have this vision, even and when we were children. Well, I always wanted to go to art school and be a graphic designer and be an illustrator and all that. But because of this traumatic experience, this transition moment, I I came to the conclusion that this is the time. This is my opportunity to do what I always envisioned to do, because the safety net has been removed. So
Yeah.
let me take a shot, right? Let me just go out there and just go all out there. And I transitioned from South Carolina to Atlanta to go to SCAD, and that was a whole different, put me on a whole different new trajectory that
Right.
ended up being my career as an advertising person, and a person who owned my ad agency. So I think when I met you, I was still in the advertising space, and I was
Oh,
still, I still was in heavy into advertising. And I think you were really into public relations and PR, and you were doing some things in that nature, of that nature. We had some conversations, but I just want to insert an example of the transitional moments that can catapult you into places that you never imagined to go, but
right.
places that really worked out well, right?
Right. Yeah. That's exactly how it is.
And yeah, and Jordan, you might have had these experiences. How did you get from Atlanta to New York?
I mean, it's definitely. I feel um, like you said, life just kind of brings up situations where you have to adapt and move a little bit. So, I mean, for me, the Atlanta to New York move, that was one of them as well, and it's been different jobs and careers in between. And I think, like you guys mentioned, there's different things you have to learn along the way through each transition. And so that was interesting of what you said, Dr. Shika, especially with one of those big ones being the internet and social media. And I'm interested in hearing more about that too. Of obviously, I'm sure when you started going through this journey, it might have not been as much social media intensive. Like you said, social media kind of went from something that's some people's hobby or distraction to now is, what people study for a degree or is their whole job of business.
Right.
So what has that process been like for you, and how has that helped your business as well? Because I've seen you on social media and being pretty active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. So initially, I was one of those kind of people when Facebook first started. I was like, I'm not joining Facebook. I hated Facebook. I was like, why am I like? I don't understand the purpose of this. I was one of those kind of people to say I'm never gonna have a Facebook page. But then when I got a business, I was like, you cannot not have a Facebook Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I mean, it literally is overwhelming to have that much social media, but it's imperative because unless you have millions of dollars to drop on, into advertising, the best form of advertising that people really like today is seeing the founders, hearing the stories, and going to work with you so they can see the behind the scenes. And really, I had to embrace it. Not only embrace it, I had to learn it and say, you know what, I'm going to become an expert at every one of these because that's the only way that I'm going to know how to effectively use it. Even if I had a company to post all of these things for me, I'm still the one that needs to be recording the content. So how do I understand what kind of content people like? I can't understand what kind of content what people like if I don't spend a couple of hours scrolling through TikTok to see what other competitors are doing, or to see what other companies are doing, or to see what are the videos that are really making an impact. I mean, I have a cell phone. All of us have a cell phone. It's no reason why you can't look and see what somebody else is doing and mirror what they're doing and put it out there. And it may not stick the
Yeah.
first time. You just got to keep perfecting it and keep looking at, oh, okay, I need to be using these hashtags. Or, even taking a course. If you got to take a course, it's a good idea. And the reason why I say that is because one of my first viral videos on TikTok is up to maybe like 3.5 million views. And what I did
Wow.
is
Oh,
I had this video where I met Keith Lee. So, Keith Lee is a food critic. And this kind of brings up another topic we can go back to talking about the Kevin Hart restaurant opportunity that I had.
mhm,
But I've
mhm.
actually met Keith Lee at Kevin Hart's restaurant opening. And so, since we were a vendor, his official cookie vendor for his restaurant chain, we got to go to the event and meet Keith. So Keith came by the table, and at the time, I didn't really know who Keith Lee was. I kind of maybe heard about him, but the girl with me was like, "You need to get him to come by the table. You need to get him to try the cookies, and you need to do a video with him. He's really big." So at that point, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna trust her, and I'm gonna get him over here." Got him to the table. I'm like, I recorded it, and she was recording me, and I was like, "Hey Keith, come try our cookies or whatever." So in my mind, I was thinking about all these videos I had seen about people doing taste tests of how they're doing their own promotions. And so since I had seen and been scrolling and seeing other people do it, I was like, I'm gonna put it into action then on what I learned. And so I was like, hey Keith, come try our cookies. And he tried it, and before he did, he was like, before we even did the video, he said, I'm gonna be honest with you now, just I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be honest with you, and I'm gonna tell you how this cookie really tastes. So then he
Uh-oh.
tried it and he gave us our vegan chocolate chip cookie. He gave it a 9.0. And then
Wow.
for the confetti sugar cookie, this one right here, he gave us a 9.5. And for Keith Lee,
Wow.
he never gives anybody
Yeah.
nine
Oh no.
anything. So he
Yeah.
really enjoyed the cookies. And so I took that video, and before I posted it, I actually took this little TikTok course over the weekend because I said when I post it, I want to make sure this video is the most effective that it could possibly be when I put it out there. Because I was like, I need to learn how many hashtags do I need? What time do I need to post it? What does the bio need to say in the posting? All of that makes a difference. What does the hook need to say? Um, all of that makes a difference. So I actually took this course. It took me about 2 or 3 days to take this course. And the course said, use everything that we're teaching you before you post your next video. So I did that, posted the video, used all of the things that I learned, got the video up to 3.5 million views. And I think over that weekend, we sold like almost $5,000 worth of cookies on TikTok Shop because of that
Wow.
video. Yeah.
That's
So
That is
awesome.
sometimes
crazy.
you have to learn and embrace what you don't think that you are going to have to
Exactly.
embrace. And like I said,
Yeah.
it's like social media, different platforms coming out every day. And it's like, okay, now it's Lemonade. Now it's this. Now it's Threads or whatever. But if you're going to be in business and be effective and reach the people, you have to learn and embrace those social media. You really do.
Definitely.
And not only learn it for yourself on how to post it, learn and pick up what other people are doing and collaboratively come up with your own strategy to make
Hmm.
sure it works.
That's the beauty of
Awesome.
being a lifelong learner, I guess. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah.
is there's always going to be a new thing to learn. I mean, we talk about that a lot, Dad. Is
Yeah.
1 second is social media, and you think you got a good handle on it, and then you wake up and you got to learn AI.
It's
it's
gonna be
always
exactly. It's gonna be something else.
it's always
Yeah.
something else. But
Yeah.
I think that spirit that you have, um, and I think it's the same spirit you have as well, Dad. I think that's what makes you guys successful. Is when those new challenges come up, you guys don't shy away from, learning that and being humble enough to know you need to learn it too, which is, I think, a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Right.
that's a very good point you make, Jordan. We've got five different generations, I believe, in the business sectors in the workplace today, and people, are talking about who it makes them the greatest impact. But I think it's not about age; it's about mindset.
Mm,
And I think you're right. I think the folks who actually have that mindset of continuous learning and having a great growth mindset are the folks who actually can adapt no matter how technology change or where it goes, and be able to still stay relevant in the marketplace. And I've always seen that in you, Dr. Sheikha. I think that's why we connect on LinkedIn, because I'm always seeing you posting. I'm always seeing you're doing something. And even if you have to go out there and try something new that you haven't done before, you're not afraid to do that. You're not afraid
Oh no.
to go into areas and places where that are unfamiliar to learn, right? And that's powerful. That's that growth mindset, Jordan, I think that you're talking about, right?
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr.
Well,
Sheikha, were you about to say something?
oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it looked like you were about to say
Oh
something.
yeah, so when you said go to places you've never been, that's the big one because recently, well, about 6 months ago, we had an opportunity for me to be a speaker at a big trade show, well, the largest international trade show in Dubai. And so I'd always, in the back of my mind, I'm like, hey, Dubai is the place I want to go to. I never thought I would
Hmm.
go though because we got our passport. I haven't even had a passport a full 2 years. So I got a passport one day because someone was like, "Well, you're going to be selling these cookies all around the world. You need to get ready for this." I was like, "You know what? You got a good point. I had never had a passport until 2 years ago, and I think Canada might have been my first place to go because they sell our cookies in Canada as well." But at that point, I had always wanted to go to Dubai, but we had never flown overseas. Like literally, never flew that far. Like any overseas trip actually. So to fly from here, from LA to Dubai was one of the longest flights ever. It was probably like 16 hours. So that was pretty
Wow,
new
that is
for
a
us.
long
That was new. I didn't say, you know what, I'm not going to embrace this. I'm not going to take this opportunity because someone from the organization actually saw me on LinkedIn and they saw that we specialize in plant based and they wanted me to come be a speaker at the international trade show. So, I was like, I'm not going to turn down this opportunity, but, wow, I get to go to Dubai as well. So that was something I never thought that I would do. But I'm glad that I did go and
yeah.
had the opportunity to be able to be a plant-based specialist over there just because plant-based is even bigger overseas than it is here. Like, there are just so many more opportunities. Like, I thought plant-based was big here, but it's even larger over there. And one of the people that
Wow.
we met while I was there on stage, there's a chain in South Africa that's actually looking at bringing our cookies over to South Africa to sell in their stores. So it's about 1,000 stores, and we're working on that deal now. And hopefully, we'll be in South Africa selling cookies pretty
Wow.
soon.
It's
That's
it's
awesome.
crazy how far a business idea can take you. Literally starting on the West Coast, but that idea is taking you all over the world, and I think that's just really powerful. And I think I'd love to hear your perspective on the whole brick and mortar retail store side of things as well, because so much of people starting stuff now, everything is online, which is
Yeah,
great. But I think a lot of people do see the power of retail or being in stores, but they maybe just don't even know where to start. But it sounds like
yeah.
that's been some big breakthrough moments for you. So, how would you describe that journey, and how you figured out how to work that system as well?
Yeah, so I just going back to kind of what we were talking about on the opportunities. Social media, if social media wasn't available, I wouldn't even had even thought been seen to be considered to be a speaker for an event in Dubai without social media. You know, back in the day, how hard was it, Floyd, when we first started selling anything, you know, to get
Yeah.
word to Africa? Like, how do you even do that? I don't even
Oh,
know how to start without
yeah.
social media on that. But to answer your question, having a physical store versus being in retail versus selling online. So let's start with having a physical store. So I told you I had a physical store for 2 years, and the limitations with the physical store is very limiting. I mean, do you have a customer base that can come by, local customer base that will enjoy your product? Yes. You have local people who will, you know, buy your product, and you know, local money is good too. But when you start thinking about selling on a more worldwide, global scale, you're thinking that I don't know if I'll ever meet this person in Dubai who will come by to the mall while I'm there because millennials aren't selling it like me. What's the odds of them walking by, looking at my product in the mall, saying, "Oh, I could use this in Africa"? You know, so you're
Wow.
very limited, you know, with a brick and mortar of your own. Because again, you got to find qualified people who care about your product just like you do. And so I'm my best salesperson. I'm the person that can go in there and sell it and have the most excitement because I have the most skin in the game for this for this business. Now, hopefully, you know, there are people who care about your business, but nobody's going to care about it like yours. It's almost like your baby. Like you're raising it, you're watching it grow. You will do anything for this. So that really comes into play. So when you're building a store location, you have to make sure because there are some franchises that do it really well. You know, Chick-fil-A does it great. You know, I can go to Chick-fil-A in Atlanta and have the same experience in California, same great customer service, same atmosphere, same great food. But then there's some other chains that you go into and you're like, is this the same business? You know, because it's got to be able to duplicate it. You got to be able to duplicate it in order to kind of make your money go exponentially, like with the local store. So there are
Yeah.
benefits, there are pros and cons to that. The middle one we were talking about retail. Pros and cons to retail too. I love doing retail opportunities, but you know, wholesale money versus full retail money is definitely different. That has recently also changed because a couple of years ago, you know, stores were only asking for about 30 to 40% margin on a product. So
Oh,
when you go in, you would sell your product and you would keep the rest. But some of these retailers now, they're expecting like 60 and 70% margins plus slotting
yeah.
fees, plus this
Yeah.
and that. And you're sitting here like, okay, I'm only left with 5%, but I
Yeah.
created the product. Like, are you guys
Yeah.
crazy? So
Yeah.
it's been a shift in retail recently. And really, I kind of feel like the impact of that is because you have a lot of brands that are small trying to get on the shelf. And those companies, you know, with the large budgets and the millions of dollars that are being funded to them, they have pallets they can give away. They have $50,000 they can give to put their product in there instead of Frito Lay. You can put my chip in there because I'm gonna give you $50,000 a month. You know, so really the small brands like me, you're playing up against the big guys that are actually throwing money at them, throwing free pallets at them. Like, I can't afford to give you a free pallet. You know, I can go in there and do the best we can with sales and do a great job. But for me to have to give away pallets just to compete with the big boys is definitely something you have to think about retail. Now, the good side about retail is great because, you know, we had an opportunity with Home Goods, Marshalls, TJ Maxx. So we got on 4,000 stores at one time. So if you have 4,000 stores in the U.S. and Canada, and you're making smaller margins but larger volume, you can still make great money. Which brings me to our next opportunity that's coming up. I was telling Floyd that we have opportunity with Costco. And so I'm super
Oh,
excited because Costco is the largest retailer volume wise in the world that brings in billions of dollars. So it doesn't get any better than Costco. So right now we have an opportunity with them to we're already an approved vendor. We just got through all of our paperwork, which takes months just to get that alone. And so we're super excited about it. We have 2 road shows scheduled with them where I will be a part of it, me and my team. And it's almost like a trade show setup where we bring all the inventory and I'm helping to sell and talk to the customers as they come in. I'm giving them samples and they try it and they can go ahead and buy it that day. And so Costco wants to give us 2 roadshow trials. And after those are successful, those are going to be back to back. Then we'll get the big order. Now, people that I know who've gotten a Costco order, they tell me that's the best thing since sliced bread. Now, what
Yeah.
the unique thing about Costco is that they're one of the fair companies that are still left. Now, some of these other retailers want 70% of your money, maybe even more, but Costco only has a 15% margin that they're asking for from you. So as you can
Yeah.
see, you're still left with
Yeah.
85%. So to be able to sell a truckload and still have 85%, that's a golden moment. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited about working with Costco and being able to get the opportunity to sell with them because that will be really life changing. And I would say that's
Yeah.
probably the most life changing opportunity that we've
That you've
had so
had.
far.
Yeah, yeah. Joe and I was talking about the margins in retail because back when I had my ad agency, I was working with some manufacturing companies and I was educated about the retail shelf space and how expensive it
Yeah.
can be. And so we were having that conversation about about the margins, how tough it is, and to really get into retail. But you really illuminated that even better for our listeners how that works. So that's great. One of the things I want to say is that we probably need to do a second part two. We're so much for that you can bring to this to our discussion. But I, in knowing you, all the years that I've known you, Dr. Shica, you have been a credible promoter. And I don't, and that's your gift, that's your superpower because, every time I turn around, I've been watching, in any given day, I'll watch a television show and see you on there. Like, how did she get on there? That's, you know, American Says you're on some cooking show. Like, what is? And I'm like, how to look at Dr. Sheikah? She's on this show. Are you with Kevin Hart? Are you with Tiffany Haddish? Or you're talking to Kevin Durant? And I'm like, what is your secret? So talk to us a little bit about this gift you have for getting on these game shows and these talk shows and all of these things. Tell us the secret. Jordan, I want to know. No, we know. No, we
Yeah.
don't. We just want to know.
I actually think that because it was what I always wanted to do, like I told you, it goes back to the Hollywood thing. Like, and really, when I moved to Hollywood, I was always interested in commercials and uh, TV stuff and all of that, you know. But then when you get there and you're going through real life, you're like, okay, I have a little bit of time to vote to those things, but I got to still live. So I've always been interested in those things. So I guess it's deep rooted. So if it's something that you really want to do, you never let it go, but you embrace it and say, how can I make that work into what I'm doing right now? So, the passion for wanting to be on commercials, I'm gonna be my own commercial because I have my own product. So I am my own commercial. That's kind of how that goes. So you can't say I can't be on the commercial because I'm doing my own. So that's one
Yeah.
thing. Now the QVC was a good opportunity as well. And that was another thing. I had always wanted to be like a salesperson on QVC. When I lived in Atlanta, I saw some castings. It was ironic because I saw castings back then that I would actually apply for and actually like put my resume out there like a video audition. And I auditioned for these QVC roles to be a salesperson, but for somebody else's product. So that was something I wanted to do when I lived in Atlanta. Little did I know that I would ever have my own product where I could actually go on QVC myself and represent my own brand. It just so happened to happen like that. So when I went on QVC, it's funny because I literally studied. I studied how to be a good salesperson on the show. I just studied everything about like how does this person talk? How do they present? what hand movements do they use? Like, I really wanted to be that person. So when I went on that show, I was really prepared. And even before I went out, when I was waiting in the green room to go out, I was still studying. I was looking at my notes. I was like, okay, well, how do I do this? What do I say? How do I break the ice? How do I get people to laugh? How do I? And I really studied that and took it like everything I do. I feel like I have to study and know how to do it, and I want to do it well. I don't want to do it mediocre. I want to do it to the best of my ability because God granted me the opportunity to do it. And so I kind of take that thread through everything that I've done, and the opportunities that I have just kind of arose. I'm not going to say that I didn't try to get them, but they kind of just fell into the opportunity at the time. Just like the Kevin Hart uh, thing. Like, he had 4 restaurants, and they just closed all 4 of those, right? They closed all 4 of his
No.
restaurants. Yeah.
Oh,
So
really? I didn't know this.
yeah, so they're no longer operating or whatever, but we were the official cookie provider for Kevin Hart's vegan restaurant chain. And they saw me on LinkedIn, and I reached out to them and said, hey, we have great cookies. They wrote me back and they said, you know what, we're going to send this to the chef. And this was when they were first developing his first restaurant to open. And when I sent that message to his team, I think they were maybe around 3 weeks away from opening the grand opening of that store, but they had not found any desserts yet. And so when I sent that message to his team, they looked at my LinkedIn. They asked me to send some samples, and they told me, they said, we went through 200 cookies, and we did not find any that we liked, that we thought was good enough to put in a restaurant. So they were like, you're the last one. We're going to try it, see what happens. So they took it to
Wow.
their meeting, and everybody loved it. They loved it so much. And then we did a deal together, and we were ended up being granted the official cookie provider for Kevin.
Wow.
That's
That's good.
huge.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
See, I feel like it's cool seeing you guys talked earlier about the journey and the tough moments. On the outside, entrepreneurship looks so fun, but I think you guys really highlighted a lot of the tough, emotional, and challenging parts of it. But then on the other side, it's cool to see those big wins and those big breakthroughs, and even some of the ones that hopefully are on the way. So I just think that's so cool to see the
Yeah,
whole
and I'm
scale.
glad you said that too, because like, from a bird's eye view, to everybody on social media, and that's one thing you have to really juggle, because a lot of people put all the good things, the wins and all of that, but nobody posts the times that I'm crying on Michael's shoulder, like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna do this? I mean, I'm not lying. I would probably cry literally every day
Yeah.
for these
Yeah.
couple of years that I've been working on
I
this,
feel.
because, I will say you got to be grounded in faith. I mean, if I
Yeah.
didn't have God, I would have been quit. I'm gonna tell you that
Absolutely.
now. I would have been quit. But like, all the tears, all of the sleepless nights, nobody sees all of that part. So you have to really be strong, because nobody's showing that part of the journey. Nobody's showing that part. But believe me, there are a
Absolutely.
lot of down times when you got to figure out, what am I gonna do? Like, I had to come up with capital to do this project or this project, and you're like, okay, well, I've already put everything I have into this personally. How do I get this done when this opportunity is so large? So
Yeah.
you gotta try to figure things like that out all the time. When you're a founder, you got to make it happen somehow. You got to figure out, how can this happen? How can I get what I got to get done? And a lot of times it is mentally exhausting, because you give 200%, but you still have to live. You still have to support yourself while you're going on this dream. So, there are a lot of times, like I told you, I cry all the time. I'm not afraid to say it because
That's
that's
Right.
true.
real.
Praying
Yeah.
and crying, probably alternating, and then repeat.
That's real.
Yes.
And honestly, I'm glad that's why we wanted you on here, especially because we wanted someone who can share transparently the ups and the downs that come with this. Because I think a lot of times people might get discouraged when they watch these vlogs or like these interviews of these entrepreneurs, and nobody's really honest with their conversations. They're just showing the wins, but um, and everything's not everybody's business. But I think it is really helpful for you sharing that honest emotions as a part of this because I think people will really appreciate that. Dad, we're shifting over to you. What's your if I knew then what I know now wisdom you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I would go back to what what we started with when we talked in terms of the transitions. I think you and I had a conversation. I said, really, as we matriculate through to life, almost every 10 or 15 years, we become a new version of ourselves, right? And I think new young people have to understand that that transition is going to happen for us all. That is transition, and as we transition, we will have times where we have to pivot. We have to be resilient. Embrace it, though. Embrace it, but then think about, where keep your vision still clear in your mind, but embrace those transition times where you have to. Maybe sometimes you're disappointed. Things don't work out the way you envisioned them to work out. But if we continue to move forward and keep our vision in front of us, then we still can get to our destination like Dr. Shika did, like I have done, like you're doing. And and really we all have had transitional moments where we had to transition and we had to pivot and we had to be resilient. And I think that is the key to life. In addition to what I think we all will come back to when we have those times where things are a little, there's a lot of ambiguity and a little bit of you know, confusion in our lives, we come back to our values, right? We come back to our faith. I think we all are people of faith on this call. My faith is really important to me. I know it is for you, to Dr. Shika, and also you, to Jordan. So, that has been the thing that has kept me grounded when I have these transition moments. Is to rely on my faith, to know that I want God to order my steps in His Word, and I want to trust Him even when things look kind of crazy, things get kind of confusing. I will default back to my faith, and so that's what I would leave the audience with. No matter what your religious views are, I have to be real about that. So
Sure, but I think that's the perfect way to wrap up. I just want to say, Dr. Shika, we really appreciate you hopping on here to share some of your story and wisdom. And honestly, we'll have to have you on again because I think, I mean, Dad, you probably agree. We had a lot more questions we wanted
yeah,
to ask, but we'll
yeah,
probably have to ask those in a different one. But we really appreciate the time because I think this would be very helpful for a lot of people.
most definitely.
It sounds good. Well, Dad, appreciate you helping us host another episode. For everybody who's listening or watching, definitely stay tuned. We'll
Yeah,
have another episode really soon, hopefully with Dr. Chica and some more guests.
yeah.
So appreciate you guys for listening.
All right. Have a great day.
All right, see you everyone.
Take care. Bye.